Death that claimed its victory. The King of love had given up his life. The darkest day in history. But on a cross they made for sinners. For every curse his blood atoned. Final breath and it was finished. But not the end we could have known. For the earth began to shake, and the veil was torn. The sacrifice was made as the heavens roared.
Can I invite you to move up to the front here, and we'll get the kind of official part of the evening going. Lynn's only just sat down, I can see, but come on down and feel free to mix yourselves up. Come on, you can bring your coffee and your cake with you, or a slice of salami and a bit of cheese. Okay. Didn't you see those things, Simon? They're on the tables. The cake is by the coffee, and the cheese and salami is on the tables. But if you want to go and get some, you can wander around and do that. Okay. If you find you're sitting next to somebody you don't know very well, say hello. If you're sitting next to somebody you know extremely well, improvise. Okay, down you come. Come on down. Okay. There's a seat somewhere, Maureen. It's all right. Could I indulge you? Would you mind if I took a photograph of you all, just so that we've got one? Well, we could do. I think. Hello, Martin. You're up there. Okay. I'm going to tell you. Would you want to? If I count to 3, can you then smile? 1, 2, 3. And then if I count to 3 again, can you smile and wave? 1, 2, 3. That's great. Lovely. Thank you very much. There you go. Just what I'm planning to do this evening is just to kind of talk you through how Joy and I spent our time while we were on sabbatical. I'm really sorry Joy's not here. I hope she might be watching on the live stream. Are we live up there, James? Okay. Well, if anybody's watching on the live stream, it's great to have you with us, and I hope you enjoy this too, and I hope it all works for you. But Joy's still at her mum's with her brother and sister, doing the sort of things that need to be done after somebody's died. So she sends her love. But I'll just talk these things through. I think I'll tell a little bit of the story, and then we've got a little bit of a a reflective piece that Joy's done, which we can listen to. I might then take a brief break so that we can go and get a recharge on the coffee or the cake or the cheese and salami if you haven't managed to grab some, and then tell you the rest of the story. I am intending to finish by 9 o'clock, all right, but I might end up racing a bit to get there. So, all right, well, thank you. Should we pray before we start? Lord, thank you for your goodness, and thank you for your presence. And thank you that we can come together this evening. And I pray that as I share a little bit of our experience as we went through our time away, there would be things in there that actually you use to speak to each of us and perhaps to all of us as a church. So thank you for tonight. And we ask for your blessing on our time together. In Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to have to give James the nod to move the slides on. So we began on April the 15th, which feels like a very long time ago now. And the first thing that we did was that we went off to Penhurst Place in Sussex for a retreat. And this is Penhurst Place up there. It's a lovely Jacobean house, which has been a sort of retreat house with a history for the last 60 or more years, I think, of offering refreshment to missionaries who come from overseas on furlough. It was a family who were related to Hudson Taylor, the missionary to China, and they've had a history of this, and it's become a retreat house, and it's a lovely spot. It's kind of tucked round the back of the Ashburnham estate, just across the fields. And we went there first. And that really was the beginning of our sabbatical, with the emphasis on Sabbath, actually having a rest. It's a lovely place. It's very comfortable. The cooking is good. And we bumped into some very interesting people while we were there. And one of the things we found when we were there was some sort of little helps about what Sabbath was actually about, actually how we engaged with this opportunity to rest. And we found some words which somebody had chosen about the process of Sabbath, which really helped us as we got started. And the first word is cease. It sounds kind of obvious, but actually if you're going to have a rest, you have to stop doing what you were doing. And we recognised that that was important, and we were kind of rejoicing in ceasing the responsibilities and activities that we usually do. And having ceased, then it's to rest. And we enjoyed that, and we enjoyed not having to do things. And I have to say, Joy and I have a feeling that the wildflowers this year were particularly good everywhere. It's either that or we simply had the time to enjoy them. But certainly, wandering around the woods in April, the bluebells and the wild garlic, phenomenal it was. And we just had the opportunity to go and to wander around and enjoy them and kind of be restored by the gift of creation. So that was good. So that was cease and rest, and then embrace, actually take hold of the experience and use it as an opportunity to engage with God, which we were able to do. And the last word was feast, just to enjoy it. And we managed to do that. But it was just a helpful start for us about setting the dynamic for what we were doing. That it was about ceasing, stopping those things we'd normally do. It was about resting and feeling free and being free not to have to be busy. About embracing all that God gave us in it and then feasting on it. So it was a wonderful start. It was a lovely week, and we really enjoyed being there. Hang on, I'm just going to change what I'm doing here so I can see what's coming. That's better. So, having done that, we were near my dad's, and we had to duck out of the resting bit for a little while, because, can I have the next slide, James? Some of you will know my dad died last autumn, and he'd been gathering stuff for 90 years, and all of it was in his house, including some other stuff that other people had deposited there for various reasons. So we did have the opportunity to go. In fact, Joy and I went twice, and I went a third time, just to sort through the stuff, and in good Stacey Stollerman style, to pull it all out, to decide what we were going to keep, less than 50%, what we were going to give away, and what we were going to dispose of. So that wasn't exactly rest, but it was a great blessing to be able to do that and have the time to do that and get that kind of sorted. Because I think another dynamic of the kind of Sabbath or resting thing was actually about restoring order to those parts of our lives that might have felt chaotic, and this was one of them. So we did that. And then we went off to France, to Bethany, which is the prayer and training centre for the Bless Network, which is led by Chrissy and Gerard Kelly. Do you want to put the next one up, James? Some of you will remember Chrissy and Gerard. They came and led a church weekend for us at Ashburnham in 2008, and they also did one when we used St George's Hall, St George's Church in Broadstairs. They have long had a sense of calling to plant churches in Europe, and they have settled in Normandy. In a particular place they felt many years ago, they were in Caen, and they felt God gave them a promise that actually he would give them Caen, and that was a place they should work from. Now, Caen is about an hour north of Bethany, so it's a little way away, but their network, and they've worked on discipleship training, engaging in mission. They've done a lot of stuff with young adults and over the years. And what's happened is, as God has brought people to them, they've actually got 3 small churches now. One is in the little town just up the road from Bethany, the retreat house, and a town called Livarot, which has a cheese. It's just up the road from Camembert. That's where it is. And Livarot has a cheese as well, which is even smellier than Camembert. So we've tried it, but it's, one of those cheeses. Bruce likes it, Bruce Watson, for those who knows Bruce, but then he does have a taste for smelly cheeses. So they've got a little church plant in Livarot, which is led by a couple, one of whom is French, a lovely man called Thierry, and his wife Melissa, who is English but has been in France for a very long time. So they've got one little fellowship growing there, and then they've now got a church community in Caen, which started meeting in a coffee shop. They do now rent another premises, but that's actually becoming a little too small. And they're gathering kind of international congregation. Caen's actually a very cosmopolitan city, big university city, people from all over the world coming. So they've got a church there, and they're continuing to do quite a lot of work with asylum seekers. They've stopped doing their SOS Chai van on the peninsula, but they're still doing English lessons and supporting people and that sort of thing. And then their third church is actually planted by a couple called Tim and Jane Rook, who heard a call to church plant in France at Detling 2004, and some of us were there. And they went to join Chrissy and Gerard, and they did various things. But the thing they'd always felt God was calling them to do was to plant a church attached to a campsite. That's their thing. So what do? You do that? Well, they bought a chateau. So they've got a chateau, the Chateau de Beauregard, in the Loire Valley. I've got a picture of it in a minute. And they have set up campsite. It's now in the top 20 campsites in Europe, in the Guardian's list, and it is lovely. And they've grown a congregation from the nearby town of Chateau Renaud. So that's the kind of network. Move on to the next one, if you would, please. Is that the next one? Oh, no, go back. Sorry, that one. That is Bethany. It's a little French farmstead, and it's got a sort of main house, and then there's a meeting centre, which is like a kind of cosy library lounge room, and it also has a prayer room. And one of the reasons that we felt we could go there is we knew that they'd got a piano, and if Joy is going to rest, and certainly if she's going to pray, she needs a piano. So she stayed there. And there's a house on the right of that picture where we actually stayed. And it was quiet, and there was space to think and pray and read, which was great. The Normandy countryside around there is beautiful. Next one, please, James. So we enjoyed being able to go for a walk round and say hello to the cows and see the buttercups, and it was great. But in that, we did go down to the chateau in the Loire Valley. You know, it's tough, but you have to do these things. Next one, James. That is the Chateau de Beauregard near Chateau Renaud. And it's on the pilgrimage route to Santiago de Compostela. And they told a little story which about God's hand on what they wanted to do. Because they wanted to establish a campsite that had a spiritual heart to it. They wanted to create a place where it was a place of prayer as well. And there is a little chapel in the grounds of this chateau. But the French are funny about religious activity. And they generally have the feeling, and Lynn can nod her head, that actually, if it's business, and if it's religious, and don't mix the two. And they wanted to do that, so they had a bit of a challenge on. But when it came to it, and they had already bought the chateau, and they were intending to create this campsite, they went to meet with the local mayor, and they laid out their plans thinking this could be tricky. And instead, he said, "This is wonderful," he said. "We as a town want to do something to welcome the pilgrims. And your plan will enable us to do that." So they said, "Well, is it okay then if we have prayers every day and a service on a Sunday?" That sounds great. So in fact, what looked as if it could be sticky turned it out to be a real bonus. So they are now welcoming pilgrims on behalf of the town of Château Renaud. And everybody's happy. But it means they've been able to build this little congregation, and they have prayers at 8 o'clock every morning, pilgrims' prayers, and on a Sunday afternoon through the season, which is June to September, there's a celebration gathering which involves people on the campsite and people from the local area. So that was great. And we went down there for what they called their Blestival weekend. So from the three little church plants, the one in Caen, the one in Livarot, and the one down in Château Renaud, they all come together for a weekend of worship and teaching and ministry and fellowship. And Joy and I were invited to be part of that. We just happened to pick the time when it was happening, which was great. Gerard did contact me before we got there and said, "Would I like to do a session on a Saturday morning?" He said, "If you do a session," he said, "I can give you a bed in the chateau." That was a bit of a no-brainer. And actually, it was lovely to do that. It was lovely to be able to share with them. And it was a very special weekend with some really wonderful times of worship, pressing into God's presence, a great sense of community. And in fact, we recognised how this community, because the church in Caen came down to Bethany for the Sunday service the week we were there. And they have a rule. They say when we meet together, we eat together. That's their basic way they work. And we recognised that we kind of got scooped up and we were part of this fellowship. And they became our church family for our time out there. And it really was very precious. And it was a great time for us to be part of a worshipping community without being responsible for it in any way, and kind of sharing in their life. And also, a very highlight of that was Sunday afternoon, there were some baptisms. I've got a picture, which took place in the swimming pool at the chateau, which was beautifully warm, very nice. And they baptized 5 French people, which was really very, very special. And they each just said a little bit about why they were being baptized. And I just remember there was one guy there, his name slipped off my lips, but he was just saying that he had been a very angry young man. He'd been badly treated by his father, but he'd met with Jesus, and Jesus had dealt with his anger, and he'd been reconciled to his father. And it was just so real, and he was there with his wife, that was a powerful afternoon. So we were really privileged to be there while that happened. So that was a great time. And there's next picture is of the whole community. You can't see their faces, but that's them, just outside the barn where we met, which is usually a games room, but they ship all the outside furniture into it and turn it into a worship space, which was really very, very precious. One of the things, there were lots of things about it, but one of it was the fact that it was kind of international. There were Dutch people there were French people there were English people there, I think there were one or two Americans there. And really, and everything is done in French and translated into English. That's the way they work. It's bilingual. And that, in a funny kind of way, was a real embodiment of body ministry, that actually people working together, and particularly when some of the things that were being said, and certainly it happened when Tim and Jane were speaking about their experience in French. There was another lady called Lottie who was translating it, and as they preached, they were speaking to Lottie, and so she was translating in tears because it was such powerful stuff for her. And it was really very, very real. We were talking about Isaiah 61 and about that business about God giving us a crown of beauty rather than ashes, that exchange that we get in Christ and what that actually means. And it really was very, very precious. So that was them. And the other thing, we popped up to Caen just once, just to see where Chrissy and Jared were. Next photo. And this is the prayer room at their church premises. So they rent the upper 2 floors of a building in Caen. I haven't got a decent picture of the prayer room at Bethany itself. But it was great just to have a space that was dedicated to prayer, that was creative, and where, this is confession from your vicar here, I rediscovered enjoying prayer, because I found myself in a place where actually I was free just to rest in God's presence, rather than feeling like I got to twist his arm to fix all the problems I was dealing with. So that was a great gift, and I don't want to lose that. So I'm saying that to you now, and you can hold me to it. All right. So there were things about that time with that network with Chrissy and Jared and Tim and Jane and Thierry and Melissa, which I think really emphasise the things I think we already know are important, which is about the importance of spending time in God's presence and of growing in worship and in prayer. It was about the importance of having a real community where people function as family, where they share their lives, where people belong, where they make their contribution, and in which there is a safe space for God to make us more like Jesus. We felt we were in that. And also the kind of excitement or the challenge or both of the sharing of the good news with others, and just being part of that for a little while, and the sort of the church planting thing. I think that really excited both of us. And it's like all the things I think we noticed while we were on sabbatical are all things we knew, but it's like God gave us a space to re-engage with them and see them again. So there are lots of good things about our time in France. One of the things that Joy was able to do while we were in France was to compose some music, which is her thing. And so I'm just going to pause for a moment, and all being well, we're going to play something that she wrote while we were in Bethany, which was a reflection on our time at Penhurst on retreat. It's called Penhurst in the Springtime. And it's designed to be a kind of reflective piece through which we can pray. So if I can just encourage you to sort of sit comfortably and to turn your minds and your hearts towards the Lord, and just to see what is prompted in you in terms of your own prayers as we watch it. Now, I hope this is going to work on the live stream. James thinks it's going to work on the live stream. If it doesn't, I'm sorry, but it lasts about 4.5 minutes. Okay, do you want to play that, James? think Joy called that a piece for piano and birdsong, which you probably noticed. I'm going to say we're going to have a 5-minute break now, all right? So if you want to grab another cup of coffee or a bit of cheese or something, because I've got a bit more to say and it was difficult to break into it. So if you want to stay where you are, fine. If you want to get up and have a comfort break, you could do that. All right? Okay. Just 5 minutes. Or you could wander across and find somebody you don't know very well and say hello. There you go. There's a challenge. You got it, James. Okay. All right. Okay. Martin, do you need to be back on the desk? That's right. Thank you. Can't get the staff. There we are. Anyway, bring your coffee back down the front. And, okay. Can you pick up with the next slide, which is the map, James? Just to say, Joy's piece of music is attached to a video. I'm not quite sure where that went. But if you want to find it, if you Google Joy Spencer Springtime in Penhurst on YouTube, you'll find it. She's got a number of things on YouTube which you can find. Okay, well, that was our time in France, and we did come back, and we had a few days in Deal, and Joy went to her mum's, and I went to Dad's. And then we began our German pilgrimage, which is how we thought of it. And what we did was that we tried to visit all the interns who had come to us over the years. There's only one I didn't land before we went. I do now know where she is. Viola? Anybody remember Viola? She lived with Bruce and Jackie. And she is a vicar somewhere doing wild and wacky things. And actually, she's now Viola Graf. And she's got a Facebook page, and you can see some of the things she's up to. But we didn't find Viola until afterwards. So we set off on what our daughter Kate accused us of being our gap year, because we bought an Interrail ticket. We travelled on the train, which all worked remarkably smoothly, apart from the fact that we missed the train out of Deal up to London on the first day. There was a misunderstanding between us. And instead of going that way to Dover and up to London, plan B was to go that way to Ramsgate and up to London, which was plan B. But as we crossed over the platform from Deal to go to the other side, the notice flashed up on the screen, the train from Dover has been delayed by 14 minutes. And after we checked, the train was due to get in at Ramsgate at 12:04. But the train leaving for St Pancras was supposed to be leaving at 12:02. It was a fairly quiet trip to Ramsgate. And I think Joy said to me, she said, we'll laugh about this later, but not now. Anyway, we threw out one of those prayers that we don't deserve to pray, which is the line, Lord, I've completely messed up here, but if you could just get them to hold the train at Ramsgate, I'd be very grateful. And we got there, and they had held the train at Ramsgate. We didn't quite relax, though, because as soon as the onboard train manager, they're not called guards anymore, are they, announced what was happening, he said, welcome to the 11:04 from Ramsgate to St Pancras. We will get into St Pancras at 1:20. And we looked at each other and thought, 1:20? We need to be there by 12:30. He was an hour out. So we did work that out, rummaging through the app, and we just settled, no, we're going to be fine. When he made the announcement again, 1:20. But anyway, we did get there, and all went very smoothly. And we travelled out to Germany in the company of rather a lot of football fans, because we'd managed to pick the Euros. So we travelled around various bits of Germany with the Tartan Army, who were very well behaved and very stylishly dressed. So we set off on this trip, and we did this kind of loop. So we went down from London to Paris and across to Stuttgart, and then Stuttgart down and across to Munich and round and back over a month. So that's what we did. And these are the people that we went to see. James, put the first one up. There, that's Kirsten, who you may not recognise because she's had a haircut. But we went to see Kirsten. She's living in a town called Ditzingen, which is just northwest of Stuttgart. It's a town about the same size as Deal, actually. And she is working effectively as a deanery youth worker. She's got a youth work support job, working with young people and working with people who are working with young people in a group of about 5 or 6 parishes. She lives in the top 2 floors of a sort of big house, and it's full of the furniture that she's made out of pallets. Those of you who knew Kirsten will know she's very enterprising, very creative, and she does that in her spare time. So she put us up, and that's sitting at the table the day that she made us Maultaschen, which is a traditional German dish. It was very nice. She showed us round Ditzingen, and it was a pleasant little town with loads of churches, I have to say. She's in the sort of attached to the Lutheran church, which is like the parish church, but there were enormous and beautiful Catholic church buildings and an apostolic church and another evangelical church. But we were pleased to say that by walking around and peering through the windows of the apostolic church, somebody invited us in, and Kirsten said, I haven't got in here yet. So that was good. It was lovely to see her and lovely to sort of reflect with her on what she was doing. And Joy and Kirsten got on extremely well. Next slide. Because they set to and got Kirsten's sewing machine to work, which she was really pleased about. So they had a happy morning fixing it and getting to make things, because it was another little project that Kirsten wanted to press on with. While we were there, Kirsten had an evening with some young people, and she said that I'm working to kind of change the way that we're doing our youth ministry. She said, tonight's an important night, I hope it goes well. So we had an evening to ourselves while she did that. And she came back and said, I've had a really good night. And she said, and I'll tell you why. She said, at the end of the session, a young German lad who was 14 came up and said, do you mind if I give you some feedback? We found that Germans are beautifully direct. So Kirsten said no. He said that was a really good session, he said. So Kirsten said, well, would you like to tell me why? And he said, yeah. He said, because the way that you're doing this, you are clearly interested in who I am as a person and not just putting me through a program. Which, it's the relational thing. It's about growing faith through relationship. And it was just a very interesting embodiment of that. The other thing she said to us was that actually we had created quite a stir by coming to see her. And within her sort of professional ministry team, there was sort of, well, why are they coming? And the feeling was, he was your placement supervisor years ago. Why is he interested in you now? And we did spot that there was a kind of very organisational and professional approach to things, and just coming in at a relational level and saying, actually, we continue to be interested in what Kirsten is doing and want to continue that relationship, actually stirred some things up, which she said was quite helpful. So we hadn't seen that one coming, but I think it just enabled her to affirm the kind of primacy of relationship over structure. And she sends her love, and it was great to see her. Next picture, James, that's just the church kind of next door but one, from the huge church community building, which you can just see a little bit of, which is more modern, and where all sorts of things, and particularly musical things, choirs and orchestras. We learned that choirs, orchestras, and brass bands, really important part of the life of the churches. So that was Kirsten first, and then we took the train down to Tübingen, which is a lovely university city, to find Micha, he was 18 when he came here. He's now 24, and he got married to Emma in February. She sadly wasn't there because she was visiting somebody in Berlin, but Joy would have loved to have met her because she's another musician and worship leader. We met Micha in Tübingen. And that's the town hall in Tübingen. And Tübingen's a very pretty sort of medieval town with lots of half-timbered houses, which are quite colourful. And Micha is just coming to the end of his theological education. It takes a very long time to train to be a minister in Germany, if you're going to go into the Lutheran Church. And it starts with 2 years of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew before you do anything else. He'd done all that. And it generally runs for about 7 years. You can do it a bit quicker, but quite a lot of them organise their own placements, like coming here and doing different things to get some more experience, which I think is quite a good thing. But the thing that bothered me was that if for any reason you drop out of this 7-year thing partway through, you get nothing at all. There are no certificates, there's no accreditation. If you don't get to the end and pass your final exams, you've got nothing. What we also discovered is that the Lutheran Church is facing some crises, one of which is people going in to train for ministry, because they have found that actually in the last couple of years a number of young people offering to begin this 7-year training has fallen off a cliff. And the Lutheran Church doesn't seem to have any means of late entry to ministry. You can't kind of do one career and change. Well, you can, but if you do, you have to start with 2 years of Latin, Greek and Hebrew and do the rest of the 5, which means it's kind of impossible, really. And they've got a lot of ministers in their 60s who are coming up to retirement. So big challenge there. But what was encouraging with Misha is he's obviously becoming a real leader, and a real leader in finding new ways to make disciples and learning from many of the things that the UK Church has learned over the last few years. I'm delighted to find the magazine, I haven't got a copy of it, of the Church Convention Network, which all these youngsters have been part of, which is a kind of God doing new things network, Fresh Expressions network. And there was an article in the middle that featured Misha having an interview with various people. And it was great to see him doing that. But it was also interesting to find out what's happened for him in terms of the development of his spirituality. Because Misha has actually learnt to treasure solitude and silence, including a 3-month bike ride from the north of Norway back down into Germany all by himself. And I was doing quite a lot of reading about disciple making and the place of spiritual disciplines. So it was quite interesting that Misha, who was a very sociable, very extrovert guy, has also found the benefit of learning to be quiet before God. Not that he was very quiet whether he was with us, but we found that out. So we loved seeing him, and we loved seeing Tübingen, and he took us for a hike one Sunday morning, which proved to be a little bit of a challenge towards the end, because the hill got steeper and steeper and it became more and more like scrambling. And in the end we did get to a castle right on the top of this hill, which was one of the places where Luther hid out when they were chasing him. It was great to be with him for that time. And then in the evening, next photo, we went back down into Tübingen, and this is St. Jakob's Church, and we took part with Misha in a worship service for young adults, which took place at the back of the church. So the chairs are in place, but we met up in the bit beyond the arch so that it could be a bit more informal. And the whole thing began by having drinks around stand-up tables, which is very nice. You went in and got yourself a bottle of drink and chatted. And then we had some worship, which unusually they stood to sing, because most of the time we found that people sat to sing, which we found really weird. But they sang, and there was a guy there gave a great talk, and then they all had chili con carne afterwards, which Misha had spent the afternoon cooking. So again, it was worship, it was community, it was growing together, and that was great to be part of that. And we spent a couple of days there. But it was very interesting talking with Misha about his training and about preparation for ministry, and also about how formative he found his time here, because he hadn't actually decided to start his theological training when he came here. He was thinking about it, but actually he was excited by what God could do by being with us, and that kind of set him off on that trail. So that's Misha. And then we went across to the southwest of Stuttgart to find David and Benita. Now, strictly speaking, David and Benita didn't come quite through the same routes, but they spent 3 weeks with us last year, and they came with little Raphael. But if you remember, Benita was 7 months pregnant when she was here. So we met Luis, who was a year old when we got there, and we spent a week with them. David is vicar of 2 village parishes, fairly rural, lots of farmers. Just across from where they live, there is a dairy farm, which Raphael really likes, and they often wander around there, and there are cows and manure and tractors, so it's a small boy heaven. That's their house, and like I think most of the parish priests' houses, farmhouses, the bottom story actually is kind of church rooms. There's a parish room and the vicar's study and an archive store and a loo, and that's at the bottom. And then they live on the next 2 floors, so they've got accommodation on the next 2 floors, which was quite interesting. Not sure it entirely worked for us as a house, but that's how it was. Particularly when the garden was down below the bottom floor. So if it was a family, you wanted to go out into the garden, you had to carry everything down 3 flights of stairs on a tray, and then carry it back up again. But anyway, they were very happy there. And as I say, David's vicar of these 2 parishes. The next picture is the kind of that's the kind of area he lives in. Lots of farmland, 2 villages, and he is kind of, I think, walking the dual track, which I think all these youngsters are doing, of maintaining the traditional structures, but also trying to build discipling communities alongside them. I went one Friday evening with David to a prayer gathering, which only took 3/4 of an hour, to meet some of the key folk in the church there, which was lovely. But we also went to a baptism service. Now, perhaps I haven't. Yeah, I have got a picture of this, which I'll come on to in a minute. But just this twin track of the traditional stuff and a more accessible disciple-making community alongside. They allowed us to kind of look around their area. I'm going to show the next one. They're near a place called Schwäbisch Hall, which is a beautiful place with a long history. That black and white timbered house is called the New House. It's been there since the 16th century, but it was the New House then, and the name has stuck. And we enjoyed looking around there. Next one, James. But on the Sunday, we were with them for a baptism service, and David had to agree to baptise 5 children that Sunday. It was more than he'd want to, but it was June and they all wanted it. I know exactly how he feels. But it really was quite interesting because all these folk who came to church never come to church, but they've come for the baptism. We learnt that, in lots of places, more than 70% of the people sign up, because the default position is to sign up as members of the Lutheran Church, which also then means you pay your church tax, which is at 9% of income. So it's quite a lot of money. I guess they're thinking it's 9%, which leaves you 1% that you can give to somewhere else. I don't know. But only 2% of the people paying their church tax ever turn up for worship. So it kind of feels like that part of society is more like the UK was in the 50s and 60s, long time ago. And it creates great opportunities in terms of contact, but it also means that you are dealing with people who are very nominal in their understanding of what faith is. And David did a fantastic job with that morning, and they're very welcoming. But what happens is, of course, the regular worshipping congregation don't tend to turn up for that because it happens once a month and they've had enough of it. So it's a bit of a challenge. But everybody was very friendly, and we had coffee and cake afterwards, which was always good. So just seeing the situation David was in, he teaches 8 hours a week in a local primary school, teaching RE, which does mean he gets to know all the local children. But it's actually quite a large chunk of his time in the school. But we enjoyed being with them as a family. I enjoyed reading books with the children, which is great for learning your German vocab. Just, especially the one about toilet training. But it was lovely to spend the week with them and just to have time to reflect with them on how they were seeking to lead the church, and particularly from Benita, how they make it friendly to children. So they were pulling out some pews to put a children's area in and thinking about how they would do that. So that was David and Benita. And then we caught the train south, or southwest, down to Freiburg in Breslau, where we met up with Missy. Well, actually, we'd already met Missy by this stage because she managed to turn up while we were with Misha in Tübingen, because Missy hasn't finished her theological training yet either, not least because she's taken the year out to have a baby. And she needed to get to the library, and she turned up in her mum's camper van while we were there. It was slightly bizarre, really. We ended up having breakfast with Missy and Misha in Misha's flat, which was lovely. But this is in their flat in Freiburg. Next picture. Freiburg is a lovely city, and it's both lovely in terms of it's got an old medieval old town, and it's also a very prosperous and beautiful new city. That's the view from the apartment we stayed in. Now that's part of the old one. And one of the lovely things is it has all these little sort of streams or rivulets, Bechel, down the side of the street. Every street's got this kind of open flowing water, which is lovely in terms of cooling the place down in the summer, because Freiburg is the place that gets the most sunshine hours in the whole of Germany. But it was quite hot when we were there. And the local tradition is little boats that go on the rivulets, and the children play with these little boats and these rivulets in the street. It was beautiful to look round. And we met Missy and her husband Daniel and their little girl Eliana, who was about 9 months, I think, when we were there. That's right, and that's us with them having a picnic in the park in Freiburg, and we were very glad to get into the shade because it was hot. And Missy and Daniel had insisted on bringing with them one of their wedding presents, which was a beautiful picnic set, complete with china crockery, real cutlery, glasses. And it was originally in the buggy while they were carrying Eliana, but then Eliana needed to go into the buggy, and then somebody needed to carry the picnic set. So it was quite nice to sit down and use it. And Joy and I had been thinking we might get something to contribute to the lunch, but Missy had bought this enormous banquet of loads of stuff, so we're very glad we didn't buy anything. Missy, I think, is not going to go into ministry or formal ministry. She's still passionate about reaching people for Jesus and building disciples, but I think her heart is to do something slightly less orthodox, a bit wilder. That was Missy. But her challenge at the moment is just to finish her training and get it done, which she's got. I think she's got exams in November, just to finish that off. So if you want to pray for her to concentrate. So lovely to be with them as a family. So that was Missy, and then we went down to Lake Constance, or the Bodensee, and that's where Missy came from, and it's where Verena comes from. And Misha went down there and did a placement as well. And they live in a little town called Radolfzell. And the church that they come from is the next suburb over, which is a place called Böhringen. And we had a wonderful 5 days there. Just out of interest, that's on the lake, on Lake Constance. And that building is a medieval building in which the council took place to decide which of the two popes in the 15th century actually would be the real pope. One of the things I learned was that my European history is dreadful. And European history is much more complicated. It seems to move to and fro. Some of you will know that. This was the building where they decided which of the two popes, the Italian pope or the German pope, was the real pope. That's where they had the discussions. This is, as I say, this is where Verena comes from. But Verena is training to be a doctor, and she was in the States at the time. That's her. That's a photo of Verena and a sheep up a mountain somewhere, which she sent us. But we spent time with her mum and dad, Anka and Marcus. They put us up. which was lovely. So that's Anka in the middle and Marcus on the end. And I think, yes, at that point we're actually in Switzerland because they live on the German-Swiss border. And we'd just gone across into Switzerland and we're having a bratwurst, a sausage, which was very nice, in a place called Stein am Rhein, which is a beautiful town on the lake, no, on the river Rhine, which has lots of half-timbered painted houses and is very picturesque. And we had a really interesting time with them, and not only because they kind of treated us by taking us out to see some places, one of which was the Rheinfall, which is the waterfall that comes off Lake Constance into the River Rhine. And in fact, it was all really full because there'd been so much rain in southern Europe. The lake was right up high, and this was all much more powerful, much more water than we would normally expect. But we had a fabulous time with that. They also took us to a woodland cemetery one Friday night across the Swiss border to see the fireflies. This place is one of those places where there are millions of fireflies. So we all drove up thinking, there'd be hardly anybody there, but no, the scouts are out directing their traffic, and it was a real pull, and there were hundreds of people. And we went up just before nightfall, about 9 o'clock, and waited for it to get dark. And all of a sudden, these fireflies were everywhere. And I'd never seen fireflies before. That was a great treat. But what was actually more interesting, talking with Anka and Marcus, was that... no, I'll do this in a different order. I'll do that in a minute. Let's go on to the next one. The highlight of our time there was that we managed to get there on the night when they had a service of sort of graduation for the young people who'd come through the discipleship and leadership training in the church. And this is the sort of thing that Verena and Missy have been through. Because what happens is lots of teenagers turn up when they're 14 for a year's confirmation course. And the vicar of the church there is a chap called Marcus Weimar. He recognised that he could do so much more with this. So he created a follow-on year, and then a leadership development year, and then a second leadership development year for the youngsters as they went from 14 to 15 to 16 to 17 through the last years of school. And gave the youngsters in the sort of 2 leadership development years the responsibility for doing the training for the ones younger. And that's the process which generated kind of Missy and Verena. And Marcus is quite a remarkable guy. Joy and I had coffee with him and a long chat, which was really exciting. I've known of him, and we've kind of dealt with him by a distance, but I've never actually met him. So it was great to meet him. He's now moved on. He's now become an archdeacon for mission and has a dual role of raising up new forms of church and closing church buildings. That's what he's doing. But it was great to meet him. But we came to this sort of graduation ceremony, and it was really touching, led by a youth minister, a lady called Lydia. And she was obviously doing a fantastic job. I must say, I would quite like to have brought her home. She was really, really good. And seeing these young people actually growing in faith and developing as disciples of Jesus really touched me. And I was very nearly in tears. And then something happened that did put me into the point of tears. Put the next one up. While we were sitting there and this was going on, Alison sent me this photograph because it was a day that Beth got ordained. And it just something in there about the preciousness of growing faith in young people and raising up young leaders really, really touched me. So that was a really special night. And the other thing we learnt while we were in Birmingham was that they are an amazing centre for storks. Put the thing up. There are storks everywhere around the church. They perch on the church and they sit in the nest and they go clack, 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 clack. Phenomenal racket. And they're protected. So if they perch on your roof, you can't do anything about it. And I've never seen them, and it was quite amazing. So moving on rapidly. Yes, so Anka and Marcus, they're actually part of, can I have the next slide? Part of a training scheme for lay people to lead in ministry, which is really big news new thing, and Marcus Weimar is pioneering this, because Anchor is on the church council there, and they've actually been leading the church for 2 years without a vicar. They do still have 2 full-time youth workers, a full-time administrator, and somebody doing social work. So it's not as if they haven't got anybody. But in terms of leading the church, it's being led by a lay team. And they're part of a pioneering training course to equip people to do that. So that was really interesting. But this photograph is the morning that we appeared on German TV. There is a weekly service broadcast by the German television network, and it just happened to be in the area, and Anke and Marcus were going, and they said, did we want to come? So we went. And it was in this beautiful island called Mainau, which is a flower island, and it was a bit of a challenge, especially for Joy, who doesn't speak any German, because they just gave us the orders of service, which had they did have some music in, at least you could see the music and the words, and Joy looked at it, and she thought, I'll go for the music, I'm not even going to try the words. So she was larring. But it was slightly scary because it was all a bit exposed, and there was a lovely lady vicar who came up and encouraged us to sing out and to look happy and smile, while we were trying to work in a foreign language and we didn't really know the tunes. But anyway, it was fun. So, and apparently it's still online if you want to go and watch it. And Marcus Weimar, this vicar, was also there. Next picture. That's Marcus. That's the best picture we got of him chatting to the bishop on a fairly... It rained just after the service finished. But that's Marcus, and it was great to meet him. So that was a great time on the shore of Lake Constance. And then we went across to Munich. Next one. That's Munich. That's the tower that was built for the Munich Olympics in 1972. Which is just down the road from where Elke lives. Some of you will remember Elke. Elke was here in 2011, so it's getting to be a little while ago. And that's Elke with her husband Max and her little boys Jakob and Paul, who is only 4 months old. We seem to spend a lot of time with people on paternity and maternity leave and with small families, which is great fun. But I think it's a good job that we have just become grandparents, so we knew what to do. Elke is the associate pastor of a church in the Munich suburb. She's on maternity. That's the church building. It's a modern building, and it has seats in the round, and some very interesting things with the light, the way the architecture is done. But we did actually visit it on my birthday, and there was a guy playing the organ who played Happy Birthday for me, which was rather nice. So, and so Elke is seeking to do what she can in that setup. But she said she too is struggling with the fact that they've got so many people kind of on their books who just don't actually show up. But they're building something with families and a sort of family congregation, which sounds important. And that was Munich, and we went and had a look around. Munich is beautiful. Next one, James. That's Joy. Because we were in Munich and it was my birthday, I felt I needed to have a beer. Joy said she would have a cup of tea, and all I can tell you is the tea was much more expensive than the beer was. There we are. But it was a little damp in Munich, but it was great to look around. And we saw some fabulous churches, particularly the Catholic ones, rather too ornate for me. But we did see one, and I really thought, I like the importance they give to preaching, because that's the pulpit. And I'm just wondering whether we could put a faculty in to put one of those in here. Yeah? Maybe not. Okay, so that was Munich, and it was great to see them. And just good to talk with Elke about what she was doing and how she was working, and she too was reflecting on her time here. Rushing on, we then passed a shop as we walked home, and it was a great shame we were travelling on the train because we couldn't actually buy a piano and bring it home. But I promised Joy we might get one day. 218,000 euros you pay for a Steinway, so we'll have two. And then we ducked out and we did a little bit of holiday. Really, this was our 40th wedding anniversary treat, so the next one we can go quite quickly. We travelled to Vienna, which was beautiful and very hot and a bit overwhelming, I have to say, but it was lovely. So that's at the Upper Belvedere Palace, which is just up the road from the hotel we were staying in. What else we got? Oh, and then we hopped on a sort of bus tour thing, which took us down to a place called the Prater, which is like a huge fairground with more ways of getting yourself scared witless than you can imagine. Quite honestly, it was Joy's idea of a very unpleasant place. But we had a look around. Even one set of toilets were daubed with blood and axes and that sort of thing. You wouldn't want to go in there. Anyway, but we came out and had an ice cream, and that was nice. Next one. And there were also some art galleries. That's the original Klimt, which was on display in the Upper Belvedere Palace, which was lovely to see. And then, having been in Vienna for 3 nights, we caught the train to Prague. And that's Charles Bridge in Prague at nightfall. And we liked Prague. Prague was friendly. There we are. And that's the Soviet-era tram, which they're great. We qualified for senior discount in Prague since we just passed our 60th birthdays. And that meant that we could travel all day on the trams in Prague for about £1 each. It was great. And that's the astronomical clock in the main town square, which does all sorts of exciting things at 12 o'clock. So we enjoyed that. And then we caught the train north out of the Czechoslovakia to visit Rachel and Florian and their little girl, Naomi, who was 4 or 5 months old, I think. And they live in a town called Altenburg, which is about 20 minutes outside Leipzig, which is it's a very nice town. And of course, what's interesting here is this is what used to be East Germany. So it feels slightly different, but it was lovely. That's the view from a church tower that we climbed all the way up over the town. So you can see these old buildings interspersed with 1 or 2 bits of Soviet-era concrete, most of which they're kind of painting and making looking prettier. And that's up in the castle with them, up the top of the town, which was very beautiful. Keep going. And then we went down and we visited the 3 churches that they are attached to. Florian is a curate at the moment, but he's going on paternity leave, and you can have up to 4 years between you, so that Rachel can start her curacy like now. We went in and we saw lots of this, where the walls have been painted to make it look like stonework, but it is just paintwork, but it's very cleverly done and very interesting. Lots of stained glass windows, but rather than Catholic saints, we have the Reformers. So, it's actually Bach on the left-hand window, it's Luther in the middle, and then I think Eberhard on the right. Fascinating to see that. But it was great to meet Florian and Rachel, and they're very involved in musical things. That's their thing, and using it to build community. And that was a meal with them where we went and I had a doner kebab, which is German traditional food. In as much as I think the doner kebab in Germany is like chicken tikka masala in the UK. It's the kind of national dish of a sort. I have to say it was very nice. So I had one of those, but everybody else had vegetarian wraps, I think. But that was fun. So that was us in Altenburg with Rachel and Florian. And then we drove, in fact, they drove us only 35 minutes away to Anya. Rachel and Anya didn't know one another. They're in 2 different kind of provinces of the church in Germany, so their paths don't cross. But they weren't very far apart. And that's Anya with her husband Samuel, who is a youth worker in the church. And Anya is vicar of 4 village parishes. It was lovely to stay with them. They took us for a walk. Next one. Another walk through the woods. Another slide. That's Joy in the woods. And if you were able to read that sign, actually one of the signs says the old bobsleigh run. Because there was a bobsleigh there, which, of course, in the summer just looks like a pile of rocks on a track. But we had a lovely walk with them there. And this is near the town that Anya grew up in, which is a place called Annaberg. It was beautiful, very beautiful. We went to church with them on a Sunday. Oh, that's Annaberg. Sorry, that's the church in Annaberg. And the fascinating thing there was, can you see the pictures? That frieze went all the way around the church, and it was about 1.5 times the size of St George's, and there were 100 of these panels, 80 of which were Bible stories, and 20 of which were the lives of the saints. Beautifully done and beautifully restored, because what's happened is the German government has poured an awful lot of money into buildings that were in East Germany to do them up. And it was beautifully done. But Anya is also building discipling community alongside her traditional responsibilities. And this is what they call a Hauskreis, or house circle, which is like a missional community. And we were there, we'd only been there a couple of hours, and they said, "You up for a barbecue tonight?" We said, "All right then." And we went to meet this lovely group of people, a house owned by a couple called Sandy and Georg. And we had a barbecue in their kind of workshop garage out the back of their house. And it was lovely to meet them and to talk to them. And this is the kind of beating heart of the church life, I think, these folk. And the happy news was actually at this gathering, Anya and Samuel announced that Anya was pregnant. So that was a source of much rejoicing, and then probably some scratching of a head by those of us on the church council on how they're going to manage when she goes off on maternity leave for a year. But that was good. And the couple whose house it was, the lady Sandy, you can hardly, she's the one just next to Samuel, little face there. Joy got on really well with Sandy because Sandy makes dolls. She's a felt artist, and she makes these beautiful dolls, which you don't buy, you adopt, you know, and they really are gorgeous. And there were loads of them, and she showed everybody her workshop, and it was Joy really enjoyed that, and they natted and natted and natted. Next one, and then one of the things that we saw with Anya and Samuel was that they've got this farmstead house attached to one of the village churches, which is enormous, but they're trying to work out what to do with it. And they're kind of thinking it might be like a prayer centre or a training centre or something. But it's kind of that they actually use it to meet in the winter, because the church next door is so blooming cold, it's got no heating. They go in here. But they are, and Anya is really working on building a discipling community. And in fact, she's just multiplied their morning service, because she was trying to bring some new elements into what they did. And basically what was happening is everybody was unhappy. The people who wanted it tradition didn't like it. The people who wanted it new said it's too traditional. So that's actually one of the things that came out of our conversations with them, was that they would split the thing. And she's done that. She just told me today. So that was really good to meet them. And then we had our final night. Picture, next one, please. Final night in Germany with them in a lovely German hotel, which was clearly run by some Christian people. And that was a very magical evening. And we even found some vegetables on the menu, which was unusual. So although I have to say the vegetables on my dish were Brussels sprouts, and this was the end of July. So I think they must have been frozen, but they tasted fine. So we made our way back from Germany, and we had a few days in Deal. We were pleased to come back. And then our final sort of trip was down to Devon, and we went down to Lee Abbey, which is a beautiful place on the North Devon coast, Christian Conference Centre, for the global gathering of the Order of Mission. And in fact, I and Bruce and Jackie, they were there, took our permanent vows as members of the Order of Mission. It's a kind of modern monastic thing. We've taken vows of purity, simplicity, and accountability. And it's about commitment to pioneer mission. And Joy and I found that really helpful as a kind of external support, and to have people to be in touch with. So we did the vows around a campfire outside, which was lovely. And then having done that, we moved across, because it was about an hour away from Edward and Bethany and Jethro, for Jethro's second birthday. So we had a lovely birthday party, and for the first time we were allowed to look after him by ourselves. Yes, it was great fun. We passed. We had him back again 2 days later. And having been down in Devon, which was lovely, we then came home, And then actually Ed and Bethany and Jethro came, and the whole family came together. And do you remember that really hot Monday in August? That's it. We went and had a picnic in Sandwich in the shade of the trees, and it was great fun. So we got to see our family, which is lovely. Got Esther and Jonathan over there, and then Kate and Daniel the other side, and then Edward and Bethany and Jethro in the middle. And that was lovely. So we did get a bit of family time too before we came home to Deal. Just in terms of kind of reflections and that sort of thing, one of the things that I've just done, was I just thought I'd contact all those interns and ask them what they actually gained by being with us. And I'll just read you some of the things they said. This is Misha, and he said this: "My time in Deal let me go deeper in my own discipleship, showed me how to disciple others," and I think he meant with huddles and in community and engaged in mission. And then he said, "I learned how to make an English cup of tea and how to engage with different age groups in the church." That was Misha. Anya said, "By being here, I realised I could imagine working in a church as a vicar. It wasn't clear before I came to Deal. Being part of the team was a joy, and I learned how to be in a traditional church and live a culture of welcoming and inviting others, people who are not used to church. And I got a glimpse of how to live the disciple-making task as a church that Jesus gave us." And then Rachel said this: "Florian and I are now listening to worship music, which is something we never did before. I found it a really special experience being part of an active church and meet so many people who wholeheartedly brought their skills into building community in church. And I learnt to teach people to lead so that you don't have to lead a community all by yourself." And then she said, "I enjoyed lots of coffee in church and talking about faith. It was such an important experience for me, growing into the person personally and spiritually